welcome to episode 3 of Carla and Brad Talk About Krautrock. Brad,
episode 3.
We've made it to episode 3.
Stunning. We don't know how many we've got in us, but we're making it this far. I don't know about you, Carla, but I'm searching for my blood flow. Yes, I am.
Oh my gosh.
We're going to talk about Can today.
Like, who are we talking about today?
That's all I had in the can, so to speak.
Exactly.
I did not intend that pun when that sentence started. We're going to talk about Can. We're going to talk about Tago Mago, their second studio album, third release, 1971. But before we get into it, maybe let's just talk more about this band and where they came from and what they got up to.
So this was an interesting one because while there were a few core members of this band, the lead singers kind of came in and out. Some of the bass players came in and out afterwards, but we're kind of mainly going to focus on, with Tago Mago, Holger, Zuke, Irmin, Schmidt, Michael Crowley, and Jaki Liebezeit. And with Tago Mago, Damo Suzuki was the lead singer. This was a band that was mainly worked out of Cologne. They formed in 1968. I did listen to a little bit. What's the first record? Monster Movie?
Monster Movie.
I did listen to a little bit of that one just because that was a different lead singer. So Malcolm Mooney was an American-born, I think he was really like a poet or an artist of some kind. And
like a beat guy.
Yeah.
Who was in Germany or something, right.
So I was really interested to see kind of how that sound changed from him as a lead singer and then leading into Tago Mago with Damo Suzuki, who they literally found busking on a street corner in Munich. Right. And then recruited him to be their lead singer for a show that evening.
Right, and he was up for it. Right.
He was like, okay. And I guess he nailed that audition because he became the lead singer of the band.
I actually have a quote from Julian Cope's book from Holger Suke describing that show, right? So this is the first performance of what we would probably call the classic lineup of Can, right? Those 5 guys. Mm-hmm. And he says, it was a furious concert. First, Damo was singing very dramatically. It was very peaceful. He was very concentrated. And then like a samurai warrior, because he's Japanese.
Right.
He sprang up. He took the microphone in his hands and he screamed at the audience. The audience got so nervous, people began to hit each other. There was a fight and almost everybody left. At the end, there were only some diehard fans left and the rest of the concert was just played for them. It was beautiful. A very good concert. So apparently Damo's principal job was to separate the true fans, the committed fans.
Exactly.
Right, from the casual fans. Apparently David Niven was there and got really fed up and left. I read that somewhere.
Oh, wow. It was not that big of a show. I mean, it was 1,500 people, I guess, is a decent sized show. But I think I read somewhere that was kind of a smaller-ish show.
It might be one of those things where everybody says they were there, right?
Exactly.
Afterwards.
Yes.
So the lore tells that Malcolm Mooney left the band on his psychiatrist's recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That it was not good for you to be spending a lot of time with these other 4 guys. And so he went back to the United States.
I read that he basically did have a nervous breakdown.
Yeah, it might have been kind of a Syd Barrett kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like a kind of psychic fracture, too many hallucinogens.
Yep.
You can hear some of that on Monster Movie, for sure.
Yeah, you can.
So back to Julian Cope, he says, Can was formed in the exhilarating revelation of seasoned musicians discovering rock and roll, which I think is pretty cool, right? These guys some of them were in their early 30s at the time. I think Suke and Schmidt. Suke apparently was a student who studied under Stockhausen. We had talked about him before in the Am Duel episode.
Yep. So did Irmin Schmidt, right? And that's how they met.
Right. So Schmidt was a concert pianist and award-winning conductor before he got involved with Can.
They were both kind of rooted in classical music, though. That's what's interesting. And I think it also explains or gives context to some of these songs that are 17, 18, 19 minutes long, too. And right, they're classically arranged to a degree, even though they certainly don't sound like that.
Right. And a lot of sound experimentation. I read somewhere that Schmidt went to New York City in 1966 and spent time with Andy Warhol, not apparently with the Velvet Underground, but almost in a similar mode to John Cale. I don't know if you've been watching the Velvet Underground movie.
I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, there's a segment where John Cale leaves Wales and he's writing to all of these crazy progressive composers and asking to hang with them. And apparently that's what you did. You just wrote letters and they said, yeah, sure, come over. And so he's in Manhattan smashing pianos with these people. And at some point, Irmin Schmidt made a similar pilgrimage, although it doesn't look like they met. But you can kind of see them following the same track.
Yeah, I think Irwin Schmidt was quoted as saying that time corrupted him somehow, like in his thought process, I think, in terms of the structure of rock music. That was something else that kind of struck me with Can that was different from Neu and Amandul, who were really trying to have a sound that was not rooted in American or English rock. And Can seemed to embrace all those different styles a little more and figure out their own way of incorporating them.
Right. I've seen in a couple interviews, Holger Suke says, apparently Michael Crowley, the guitarist, was studying under him. And they were maybe at Crowley's place one night, and he played I Am the Walrus. And Holger Suke said, rock music can do that? He said it sounded more like Stockhausen than the Beatles, right? At the very end, with all of the different voices mixing in and swirling. So he thought, okay, I can get into this. And so then the last kind of missing piece was Jaki Liebezeit, a drummer whose name literally translates to love time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I thought, oh, that's cool, because I studied German, and I remember just enough that I was like, I think Liebe means love, and I know Zeit means time. So I thought I'd made some big breakthrough, and then every single one of his obituaries makes that same observation. So you'll hear nothing new on this podcast. We're just synthesizing what came before us. But he was like a free jazz guy who had this weird conversion. I don't know if you saw that story about some random person that he had never met and never saw afterward approached him after a gig and got in his face and insisted to him, "You must play monotonously."
No, I did not read that.
Right. So this is like Saul on the road to Damascus. He has this like conversion where he's, okay, I'm now going to play this almost like metronomic style of drumming, very complex drums. I mean, you hear his drums on Hallelujah and other snippets that we're going to play for sure, right? He's dropping a whole bunch of snare in there. He's doing all kinds of frills and rolls, but it sounds like a machine.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And again, off of, I mean, would you call that a motoric beat? I didn't really necessarily feel like it still fell into that compared to the other two.
It seems a lot funkier. Yeah. When you compare at least the concepts, the structure of the drum beat, right? So when I go downstairs and I'm playing it, I got my hands moving a whole lot compared to what Kostinger is doing, just straight 4 beats on the hi-hat. So he's doing a lot more, and he's dropping a lot of bass drums and doubles and things in. But it's the way it sounds. I mean, it sounds like a drum machine playing funk music, right?
Yeah, it does.
And whatever he does, whatever way he mics the drums, they sound very distinctive. Like as soon as I hear like the snare drum and the bass drum, if I didn't already know it was a Can song, I might guess, right? Because it's a very distinctive sound, and it's very. I keep seeing the word metronomic. It's just keeping the beat very straightforward. So interesting. Like I don't the story of like the random guy who comes to him with this message from I don't know where. This is how you will play the drums now, and he says, okay, sure.
I wonder, I didn't look this up, but I sent you earlier today that single, the Holger Zuke solo project, that was popped up in my Spotify Discover Weekly, and I was working, so I wasn't looking at what was playing. I was like, this really sounds like a Can song. And then I flipped over, and I don't know who was drumming on that record. I didn't look it up, but that's what caught me in the way that was structured. Seemed very similar, and then when I looked over to see who it was, I was like, oh, well, that is why. Right.
So you're at the point, Carla, where Spotify is choosing Can derivatives for you, and like your subconscious is like, yeah, I know what that is.
It sure is.
Right. You are steeped in Krautrock.
Yes. The algorithm is working.
We're right on schedule. They did have a flute player early on. David C. Johnson, although I haven't heard anything where David C. Johnson played the flutes on it, but we do want to get that.
Yeah, that's right. And I was thinking about that because I don't really think there's any flute in Tago Mago. Maybe in Future Days, which comes after, there was a little scattered here and there.
Yeah.
But I don't hear it as predominantly as sometimes we've heard it in other bands.
I've played Monster Movie a bunch of times. There's no flute on that, and he's not listed as a contributor on it. Mm-mm. Then there's the Soundtracks album that came out in between, right? Which is movie soundtracks that they did. I don't see anything in there either, so we're not getting the flutes that we
I don't know.
have had to this point. Alas. Michael Crowley, just a note, he's 10 years younger than these others. So it makes sense, I guess, that he was the guy who would roll out a Beatles album and say, hey, listen to this.
Yeah.
And the old men play it and then get into it. Side note, his sister and his then girlfriend are the models on the cover of Roxy Music's Country House album. I don't know how I came across that. I guess you do enough searches.
Well, the 1001 album podcast guys talked about it on that episode. That's how I had heard about it. They talked about that. And I was like, gosh, it's just... when you really start to put all of this together in that time frame, it is really funny how weird things are like overlapping.
Right. All these kind of synergies and connections.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Because there's a lot of Brian Eno hanging out in Germany, getting into this stuff. That apparently was a Brian Ferry thing. He ran into these women at some point and convinced them to do this cover shoot. Anyway.
It's so random.
So you've got a rock guy, right? This guy who's pretty terrific with really piercing guitar sound and solos. You've got the jazz drummer. You've got the like avant-garde conductor.
Yeah. Have you seen some of the videos of him playing keyboards? He literally karate chops them. I don't know how else to describe it other than that. It literally looks like he is karate chopping the keys.
I'll have to go back.
It's unreal.
I was playing a bunch of the Rock Palast. I love these Rock Palast videos where there's like that little tiny corner stage that they can't fit anybody on. Yep. And there's all these like stoned German teenagers who don't get what's going on. Some of them smoking pipes, just sitting there like nodding their heads. Mm-hmm. But he's like way in the back and I couldn't, like I could see every one of them. And of course Damo's in the front jumping around like a spider. And I'm trying to peer around Damo to see him and I couldn't see him. So I'll have to go find some more.
I'll find that link and I'll send it to you because it's wild.
Right.
It's like, what is happening? It's like, so that's how we got that sound.
Yeah, so he's an interesting character. I think we'll talk more about him when we get to or whatever. I'm never going to be able to pronounce that song title. But we talked a little bit about the vocalists, right? We talked about how they found Damo Suzuki. The way he sings is remarkable. Just a ticket out, all of my money. Just a ticket out. Ticket out in the law. Just a ticket alone. Just a coming alone. Just a coming alone. Just a coming alone.
Well, it's just not traditional. Everything about what they're doing is very avant-garde. At the risk of loosely using, I think a lot of things get dumped into avant-garde that might not necessarily be avant-garde, but I think this truly is. It's experimental and weird and...
yeah, kind of freaked out, dissonant, and not always in English, not always, sometimes in Japanese, and sometimes in no language at all.
So, yeah, sometimes it's just made up, but also it's backwards sometimes, so I think some of the parts that sound like they're just made up might be spots where Zuke reversed the tape.
He'll whisper, he'll chant, he'll shriek. The Rock Palast video, he gets really wound up, and he's just shrieking in the background. It's pretty terrific.
Should we talk about Zuke a little bit more? Because I feel like Zuke is really the linchpin of Can. Like, if it wasn't for his tape editing skills, what would this sound like?
Right.
Because he was taking hours of recordings. They would record, sometimes I read their recording sessions could last 16 hours, But Zuke never stopped the tapes. So even when when the rest of the band didn't think they were recording, they were still recording. He used some of that when he was splicing the songs together.
Right.
So
how do you take, if you see some of these live videos that you could find on YouTube, you'll see like a 15-20 minute jam. It's all one song, and it's all one song because there's some recurring bass line in it, or something that carries through the whole thing and binds it together. And then you find that, okay, that turned into like a 6-minute track on an album at some later date. And that's how they would do it, right? Is they would just sit and they would jam and they would record the whole thing, and he'd hack it up into bits and just turn it into something sometimes bite-sized and sometimes the whole side of a record, right? 18-20 minutes.
Yep.
And so in terms of putting all the pieces together, that was him.
Yeah, which I think is pretty remarkable. Also, when you think this is 1970, he's not working with a lot of technology, so he's literally splicing tape together. I think it's pretty remarkable, the sounds that they were able to derive from that, and just being able to put all that together to make it into something that's moderately cohesive is pretty impressive.
And it's this weird combination of like high tech and low tech in the sense of, right, they had like two track tape recorders apparently, and they're all just playing together live. And then he takes the tape and beats the hell out of it. Right. Yeah. And he'll run it through all kinds of distortion and reverb and to get what he wants out of it, and he'll overlay it all, and he'll take a second drum beat and overdub it on top. And it's interesting the amount of trust that they must have put in him to say, we're just going to play for 18 hours and then you can take the next 6 hours and right, and we'll see how this turns out. Right. And it sounds like as time wore on, he was less interested in playing bass. Not on Tago Mago, but sort of later in the decade.
Yeah.
He was more interested in doing the editing, which as the guy who does the editing. God bless you, man, if you want to do that. But definitely the bass and the drums, to me, are what holds all of this together.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? I mean, I guess that's always the backbone of a good song, right? But I feel like with the Can songs, it's what holds a given track together.
It is, because it always comes back to that ultimately. So it could get all experimental and weird kind of in the middle, but then there's always that driving line throughout the song that brings it back and ties it together.
Well, almost always. We'll get to some of the others.
I'm gonna asterisk that.
Right. But it's almost like the guitar and Damo and the keyboards are just kind of the gravy over the top, right? They're kind of splashed on. They'll do some solos, they'll do some interesting stuff, but underneath is always this kind of forward driving. I guess in that respect, if there's anything about this that it has in common with Noi, is that on a lot of these songs, it's the bass and drums just
that keep everything going forward. Yeah, I think you're right.
And then you can texture it and overlay all these different tracks and sounds and solos or whatever it is over top. I think the difference here is that you've got these incredibly talented musicians, right? I think this is Julian Cope's point. They're working within rock music, but they're pushing the boundaries at the same time. They're bringing all these different abilities and influences. Yeah. And you get this really interesting result.
I found it interesting, all the bands that they've influenced. I mean, we had some obvious ones, right, when we first started listening to them, but A Tribe Called Quest has sampled one of their songs. Like, it gets real random.
Right. I was listening to Monster Movie, and You Do Right. That's, I guess, the sort of the crown jewel of that album. It's the entire second side. I'm hearing Malcolm Mooney say, "Once I was blind, now I can see. Now that you're in love with me, you made a believer out of me, babe. You made a believer out of me." She said, "Do what you do right." And I was like, well, that's Primal Scream.
Yeah.
I was blind. You made a believer out of me.
And then I thought maybe that comes from some common source, right? Maybe they're quoting the same thing. Nope, that Bobby Gillespie was looking to Can.
And again, when Primal Scream recorded Kowalski.
Oh, right, you sent a text about that. Yeah.
Kowalski is Hallelujah, I think.
The drum beat?
Yeah, they sampled that. We'll get into that in a little bit, but I also think that Hallelujah is 100% Happy Mondays. I hear Happy Mondays when I hear that song.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. That drum beat is perfect.
It is.
Why don't we take that as our cue to go into Tago Mago?
Yeah, let's dive into the album.
This released in August 1971. It was recorded in a 15th century castle called Schloss Norvenich.
Sure.
Which was, sure.
I was not going to tackle that.
Schloss Norvenich. All right, there we go. Owned by an art collector who gave Can, among others, rent-free access to the space to use as a studio. There was a sculptor who lived upstairs from the studio with his family. So imagine 18-hour days.
That explains why sometimes there's kids that like run into the... You
Yes.
could hear like kids in Ulm, or however we say that word.
I think that's right. That was the daughter. And apparently she would come down and listen to the sessions because they were there all day. So they didn't live there. They would actually commute back and forth. Holger says, we weren't a commune.
I'm on duel.
Right. Shots fired. I'm on duel. We spent so much time in the studio that I had to go home to go live some life. He had to check out from time to time. So they would jam all day. We talked about it. They subsequently edited, boiled it down. They did find another space. I think they felt as though they had overstayed their welcome in the castle, and ultimately recorded their next album in they found a different location.
Well, they had like rent-free access to that castle for like a year, but it only took them 3 months to record Tago Mago.
I feel like if you have rent-free access to a castle...
I mean, why wouldn't you stay there?
Right. Stretch it out. Take your time.
I mean, that's how we would do it. But
Right.
I guess it was stressful, so...
I saw something where he said, we had more influence on the sculptor than he had on us. So Tago Mago is an island off the coast of Ibiza. There's lots of talk on the internet about Tago Mago having something to do with Aleister Crowley,
Yeah.
but I could not get to the bottom of it.
Me either. I started to go down that rabbit hole, and I was like, I couldn't do it. I mean, I read an extensive wiki page on Aleister Crowley, but that was the extent of it.
I feel like if you look hard enough, you'll find Aleister Crowley anywhere.
I think so.
Apparently, Jaki Liebezeit, because he was touring Spain playing jazz with Chet Baker and spent some time there. And according to Holger, Jaki was fried and was thinking about jumping off a cliff in Tago Mago, but couldn't bring himself to do it. I wonder if that's a made-up story.
I know.
You didn't hear that from Jaki. You heard it from Holger. So, but in any case, Jaki proposed that they name the album Tago Mago. That's where that comes from. Double LP. First record has 3 songs on it, conventional songs on side A, and the entirety of side B is given over to a single extended track, which is Hallelujah, which I think we're going to enthuse about big time when we get to that.
Yeah, sure are. It's like my favorite.
It's so good. When I first listened to this album, I was going through that 1001 albums list and just trying to pick out ones that I thought were interesting. And I would play this at work, and it'd be on the background. I'd enjoy it. It was interesting. It's good background music.
Yeah, it is.
It's even better when you put the headphones on and you focus on it, right? But I'd be sitting there, and I'd hear Damo go, "Ah, la, 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 la."
Yeah.
And he'd do it over and over, and like suddenly I'm just like grooving at work.
Yeah.
And I'm just rocking out with Damo. La 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 la. Oh, it's just a terrific track. Julian Cope says Tago Mago opened with Paper House, Mushroomhead, and Oh Yeah on side 1. It's as good as they ever got. And I think that's horseshit because the next song is one of the best songs of all time.
Yeah, agreed. Paper House, not my favorite, but definitely it sets the stage for what's coming up. I feel like that one's a little more guitar driven. I actually wrote down that this had more of like a classic rock feel to it a little bit in spots.
Paper house, way back on the
that's like my notes are saying the same thing. It kind of is a way to kind of get you.
It's like a primer.
Yeah, it's like seductive. It pulls you in. It's like, hey, we're gonna get weirder, right?
Yeah.
But we're gonna give you this to start with.
There's a little teaser, and then we're gonna get in
right
to some other stuff.
I feel like in the same, it reminds me of Burning Sister from the Am the Walrus record, right?
Yeah.
It has this kind of acid rock feel, and it brings you in. And you're like, all right, okay, this is rock. Yeah. And then it's got hooks in you, and then they start doing whatever they want. Mm-hmm. It kind of takes a turn in the middle. It gets kind of intense.
It does.
Pretty quickly. Like 2 minutes in, there's this very kind of intense building thing with the drums. Fair amount of cowbell here for what they're trying to do, but I'm going to let it slide. And this is the first of Damo chanting things that don't particularly communicate any kind of sentiment at all. You just can't give them no more. You just over and over and over.
I was like, really? This seems like there's a lot of words here that I do not hear.
Right.
Like when I listen to this track.
I think a lot of those websites are going to have different lyrics for these songs.
Yeah, well, I think they're crowdsourced, right? So we could go in there and write the words to the song.
We could improve upon them maybe, but right, I don't think there's any consensus out there for what he's saying necessarily. So yeah, so Paper House kind of reaches out and grabs you. It's rock. I like it. Mm-hmm. You're kind of meds on it. Sounds like. Then Mushroom.
I was home. I was there.
Talk to me about Mushroom, Carla.
Mushroom, I mean, this is another song that's been sampled and covered by a bunch of other bands, including the Flaming Lips and Jesus and Mary Chain. There's a guitar riff that runs through this song that I love and also is in another indie rock song that I cannot place, and it's driving me crazy because I cannot find it. Yeah, I love this song. I think there's some mixed thoughts on what it's really about. Is there a bomb theory that's like running through here, and there's clearly an explosion at the end.
When I saw skies are red, I was born and I was dead. The chorus, such as it is, right, which is Damo's choruses, I think are sentences that he just repeats.
Yeah, like over and over again.
I want to get my despair. But the Jesus and Mary Chain cover that you sent earlier today was, I want to keep my distance. That makes sense.
Yeah.
The bomb's dropping.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the answer is. But I think that actually might explain the cover of the album, which is a mushroom cloud in the shape of a head with a brain inside of it that's made out of smoke.
Yep.
I don't know that
it's the 70s, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. The drum treatments here are very pre-industrial rock.
Yeah.
Just the way the snare is kind of mic'd and there's these throbbing doubles on the bass drum.
It's really cool.
Right. It's got a great groove through it.
It's a song to me that sounds modern. A lot of these tracks, I feel like while they're experimental in nature, I feel like there's elements of them that you can pinpoint maybe this 70s era a little bit, but I don't think with Mushroom or Hallelujah, I could not pinpoint a decade for either of those. Not
sounding much like anything else that was contemporaneous with it, as far as I can tell, right? Paper House, different, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mushroom, I'm right there with you. It's got that Noi out of time
Yeah.
quality. Except maybe that it sounds almost post-punk.
It does lean post-punk. And Can gets credited a lot for influencing post-punk.
That's fascinating because they do a lot of noodling on their instruments and they're very like virtuoso performers.
Yeah.
But then inspiring this minimalist, sound crushing kind of stuff. Very cool. Next track is Oh Yeah. This is where the vocals go backward for a period of time.
Yeah. In the beginning, they're definitely backwards.
Right. And at no point am I feeling like I'm getting less meaning out of them than if they were being played forward.
No, it's the same.
Right. There's a live version of this on the Rock Palost video. Did I send that to you?
Mm-mm.
You could find it. It's
Yeah,
it's 18 minutes. Right. So it's a classic example, I think, of how they made these songs.
Yeah.
Right. You look at that 18 minutes and you can get some insight. And that's what they did in the studio. And then Suke sits down and with the tape.
And he whittles it down to 7 minutes.
Right. The guitars here are pretty terrific. Piercing, over the top. Very. I don't know how to describe.
I mean, I think this is a song that really shows off Crowley's guitar work. I mean, honestly, it's just different.
I tend to forget about him when I'm listening to these songs because Suke is the center, right? He's the glue of the band. Mm-hmm. The drums are the drums, and this guy, I don't know, as drummers go. I mean, this is 3 drummers now, right? I was over the moon about the Amundul guy, Klaus Dinger.
Yeah.
Just very distinctive, if
very
not
distinctive.
Technically masterful. And then Jaki, awesome. And then, so you kind of forget about Crowley, and then you realize, okay, what he's doing over top of all this stuff is just extraordinary.
And that's what's incredible about the band as a whole, is that they are so talented, each in their own right. And then you put that all together. I do think that Oh Yeah is really one that kind of showcases what Crowley could do. Andy was so young.
Right. He's in his early 20s. Mm-hmm. These other guys are in their 30s. That's side 1. And now Hallelujah. 18 plus minutes.
It's perfection.
Right.
The song to me is perfection.
And you sent it to Mark and to Bob.
Again.
Crickets. Nothing.
How can you not listen to this?
Right.
It's like everything we listened to.
Right. Just from the very beginning, the drum beat at the very beginning, which we're going to play like right here with the bass over top.
Anybody see this snowman standing with the low? With broken guitar in his hand, on your being sleepy eye.
How do you not hear that first 20 seconds of this song and say, all right, I'm in. I'm sold.
I don't know. Oh, I love this song so much.
Relentless mech funk is what I wrote in my notes.
Wow.
The rhythm section is the core of this and drives it forward. Liebeszeit and Suke for the win. There's a second drum track that they play over top of this, which as I'm sitting down at the drums, I'm like, this guy's good, but
Yeah.
I know I can't do this. But there was a period where I thought, but maybe he could. Maybe he does have the 4 arms to play the 2 drum tracks at the same time.
right. It's one track laid over another one.
Then kind of you can also hear what Suke's doing at the mixing board here.
Yeah.
Not that they had one. There's just all these interesting sounds kind of thrown in, overdubbed over top.
It drops out in points and then comes back in.
Yeah, where the drums drop out in the middle. We got to play that too.
Yeah, I mean, they just drop out.
And then the minute they come back, you're just like...
You're like right back in it again. Like that, it's brilliant. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Brilliant in the way that he edited that together.
Right. There are like all these creaking sounds and grinding sounds, like early industrial kind of stuff. You hear the violin scratching that makes you think of John Cale and the Velvet Underground.
Yeah.
Not that the Velvet Underground would ever sound like this, but...
It's definitely a song that lends itself... Well, actually, this whole album, most of these Krautrock records, you have to listen to them in headphones. You can hear the subtle, like, nuances of what's happening way better than you can just listening to it in your car. It's hearing all those little, like, bits and pieces and tape scratches and different things that really... Right. It was all purposefully put there. And that's really what I love about it.
We talked about this with For Immer, right? That you can hear it a million times, but not be ready for what you're hearing maybe in your left channel coming out of the guitar, or in your right channel, some sound effect that they've thrown in. And then Crowley again on the guitar. The song's second half, he's just playing solos over top.
It's brilliant. I mean, it truly is brilliant.
Right. Damo starts this. Did anyone see this snowman standing in the wind alone? That's the first line.
The lyrics are really worth looking them up and reading them because...
And there's another discrepancy here, right? Because I originally had heard Searching for My Brother, and at least one website that I looked up suggests that's what he's singing. But the weight of authority on the internet is saying Blood Flow.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
And then he just gets into just...
That's the best part. That's the best part.
It's right. Like, it's... You can't do it justice. You can't be like, oh, then this guy just starts scatting. And just, it's basically singing a 3-note guitar solo, but it's awesome.
It's awesome.
And we can't get them to listen to that.
I know. I think it's just out of principle now.
I think they don't like the side project.
I don't think they do.
So
the record takes a real turn now on the second disc.
Right. Needle scratch.
For real. It's a tough listen. I'm not going to lie.
Did the Am Dual album come before this one or after? I want to go look because I feel like they follow this similar track, right?
That's a really good question. I looked up Noi actually to see the chronology of this record versus Noi 2, and this came out before Noi 2, but I didn't look up Am Dual.
It looks like Yeti came out a year before. I think it's interesting because they seem to be following the same model, which is like, we could do just one album, right? But we're going to give you a second disc. And on the second disc, we're going to just mess around. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but as I said before, right? Burning Sister and Paper House kind of operating in the same way, which is to get you kind of comfortable and not shake you up too much as they're caving in around you and starting to do some really weird shit, right? But on the other hand, like, I feel like the improvisations on Yeti at least have some structure to them.
Yeah, they do. There is definitely still a structure in there when you look at, from an experimental standpoint, what they were doing with that album, there was still a constant or something kind of running through there even when shit got weird.
Right, right. So the improvisations as they were doing them, an 18-minute, this is what would be handed to Holger Suke to mess with,
Right.
and turn into something different. That's what Am the Walrus was doing. They were just going to give you 18 minutes of freewheeling, but it sounded like something. So, are we going to be harsh here?
I have to be honest, like, I don't love it. I don't love this last 3 songs.
Yeah.
And weirdly, I actually started to come around to Peking O a little bit, which originally I texted you and was like, I cannot even get through this song.
Right.
Like, I can't get through it. But when I listened to it in headphones, I still don't love it, but there were pieces and parts of it that I was like, okay, this is interesting. But it's so disparate what's happening that it really doesn't really make any sense.
I 100% agree with that. There are parts of it that I'm like, oh, this is good. This works. And after you've heard it 4 or 5 times, you can kind of get your head around it and you can say, all right, I'm going to take this little piece out. This is music. It's recognizable as music for me. It's now familiar. It's a little weird, but I'm totally down for a little weird. And then it gets a lot weird. And then
I'm just kind of out. I mean, I appreciate it for being like super avant-garde, and you can really hear all the tape manipulation when you have it in headphones. But I would stop after Hallelujah moving forward.
Right. And you've got a full-length LP.
Yeah, I don't need that second
You've
one.
got, right. Yeah, I'm good. We can drop it here. Let's talk about these songs, though, individually. AUMGN. I kind of had a breakthrough in thinking about this because I played Hallelujah and then I played which is the way it's supposed to work in sequence. But maybe the 6th or 7th time, I was thinking, there is all this dissonance and confusion in Hallelujah, right? There's the creaking, right? There's the shuddering sounds with the violins.
Yeah.
There's whatever Damo's doing in a particular moment, which is either within or without the boundaries of language. So imagine now you take that, but then you take the bass and the drums out of it, right? So you don't have that backbone anymore. You just have this collage of sounds, this amorphous blob of stuff.
Okay, so when I listened to Om in headphones today, I was truly terrified. It sounds like a soundtrack to a horror film, frankly. If there was a sinister meditation on my Calm app, that would be that song. Like, it just has this weird horror film vibe to it.
So you put on Paper House, you close your eyes, you wake up 35 minutes later in the middle of in the pitch black at night, and you're
afraid that the guy from Yeti with the sickle is coming after you.
Right, and you hope he freezes to death before he gets to you, like Jack Torrance did.
Right.
In The Shining. So there is this kind of occult thing going on here. AUMGN is the transcription of a spell invented by Aleister Crowley, who adapted it from the Hindu Sanskrit sacred syllable Om. I don't know what it is about Aleister Crowley and 1970s musicians, but Michael Caroli was really into this stuff and had been talking about it. That is occult matters, and Crowley in particular. And so Irmin Schmidt, 10 years his senior, starts chanting this incantation into an open mic and freaks out Crowley. There's a 33 1/3, you know that series of books, paperbacks about albums. I have the Tago Mago one, which is sort of interesting, but there's not as much there as I would hope for. It's maybe like a third of it is actually about the album, and the rest of it is about sort of the authors finding this album in the record store and playing it and blah blah. Anyway, he has a quote from Crowley. It says, at the time I was interested in magic spells, and Irmin knew of the spell through me. But I had a completely different concept of what to do with it than to irreverently quote it in a piece of music. At the age of 21, I wouldn't have dared to put this word recklessly on an album. For me, it was black magic. It was Aleister Crowley and all that, and it gave me the creeps. So, right there with you. I told Irmin to stop pronouncing magic spells in the room. But Irmin naturally overrode that with his arrogant grin.
That's funny.
So definitely an Irmin Schmidt track. So there comes another point where he and Damo just show up at the studio and start beating the hell out of a chair with drumsticks and smashing them. And Jaki Liebesleid says, this is cool. So he sits down and plays drums with it. And all that was recorded. And Suke distorts the hell out of it. And the result is this percussion segment at the end of it.
Yeah, I wrote a note that I put the drumming sequence that comes in at around the 14-minute mark was interesting. It kind of gets back into the groove of like the earlier songs.
It's just like, I just give you the drums back.
Yeah.
Right? Just give me something to hang on to.
There is some creepy shit that flies into your headphones, though, during that song. It, like, freaked me out. It was weird.
Yeah, it seems like this was Irmin Schmidt's baby. I said, So that's what I've been doing all this time in the podcast. I've been incanting Aleister Crowley's.
Here we go.
Whenever I'm fumbling for words. Here's another quote from Crowley. We had already been in the studio for 2 hours when Irmin suddenly appeared. The whole thing degenerated into a violent orgy. Irmin practically destroyed the studio. He practiced musical vandalism, and I was angry. So Crowley didn't like anything about this song, apparently, at the time. Jaki wasn't. He just went along. Irmin came in and started breaking chairs. What is it? It's 16 minutes? 17 minutes?
I think so.
Is it the full side of the second disc?
It is the full side of the second disc, yeah.
I feel like there's more here than there is with Peking O, but Peking O has been making a late run. I feel like I've been getting it a little more.
Same. I keep saying it, but listening it to headphones makes such a difference, because I was listening to it in the car, which usually is fine, but you just don't get the nuances of what's happening with the instrumentation and the tape manipulation and all that. You can't hear those little things when you're listening to it, like in your car or wherever. So
right.
I actually was kind of sort of coming around to Peking O after listening to it a couple more times.
It's got a big mushy middle to it. Mm-hmm. You've got this driving my way back to yesterday thing from Damo at the beginning, which is pretty cool. We got this Mama Gonna Eat, Papa Gonna Eat.
So weird.
From Damo. I'm like, okay, I don't know where you're coming from, man. I don't know what you're thinking about, but I'm there alongside you.
Yeah.
And then he starts with the gibberish.
Yeah.
And
I mean, not my favorite. Again, I appreciate it for the avant-garde artistry of what's happening here, but I'm just not going to keep coming back to this part of the album.
There's some parts of it that are kind of veering perilously close to jazz, which isn't my thing either.
Yeah.
So I'll look at, be on the internet and I'll be reading reviews or even just comments on reviews about how brilliant these songs are. And I don't want to be the close-minded, right?
I mean,
I'm not interesting enough to like Peking O, but I don't know if I am.
I'm like, and you know what? I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
You know, I picked this, it was my pick this week, and I picked this record because of that. I'd listened to it before, but we've been reading all these reviews, and it's really regarded as this record and like Kraftwerk. Like, I feel like these are the two bands that get
Canonical.
they get discussed the most, you know, with this genre, and this album is just so highly regarded that I thought it was worth diving into a little deeper. And the first of the two records, I love it, but the second one,
Right. The ending of this is kind of cool. There are drums that kick in.
yeah,
It kind of goes back into that post-punk of Mushroom, but maybe a little edgier.
yeah,
You know, when you watch the sci-fi movie, like post-apocalyptic sci-fi movie, and they go into the dance club, right? And everyone's
Yeah.
wearing bondage gear.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I could see this playing in the background of that. Like,
Yeah.
okay, like the very end of Peking O, like the last maybe 3 minutes. But yeah, to be fair, there's a lot of, I don't want to say junk, but in the Noi albums, there's a lot of stuff, right? They're the songs that I gravitate to time and again and adore. And there's a lot of stuff in between that we were talking about last time. Is it filler? What are they doing here? Although I feel like the way that Noi was challenging me was kind of more up my alley.
same. To your point, Peking O gets a little jazzy, which you don't love. Some of these songs, to me, start to sound a little jam bandy, which I don't love at all. So
Yeah,
when things start to like veer into those arenas, it just gets hard. It's like
right.
we have plenty of things to listen to. I don't need to listen to this. That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah. No, I feel like you and I are on the same page of what we're not into.
Yeah.
That's
We
sort of
are.
borne out of the text thread over time. I suppose Mark and Bob are too,
Yeah.
when you think about
Yeah.
it. Because they're not into this. This album is terrific. And I think the first 4 tracks alone carry it. I mean, if you took Noi 2 and you said, all right, Lila Engel, For Immer, Super, Neuschnee, 4 tracks, perfection. You can take the first 4 tracks of this album and say, good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We'll keep it there. I'll keep the second album in the sleeve, or the second record in
Yeah.
the sleeve, and I'm good.
Yeah. And the last track is Bring Me Coffee or Tea, right? And
Oh yeah, we hadn't gotten to
talked about
yeah.
that one yet. I kind of feel the same about that one. It's still a little weird.
It settles a little more. It's
Yeah.
kind of bringing you back a little bit to the conventional, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Drum,
after you've
bass.
after you've gotten through Om and Peking O, it is a bit of a palate cleanser.
That's a good word for it. I think that's right. It's the equivalent of the final round of bongos and acoustic guitars and Yeti, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna mellow now. Like, this is the denouement of all this. I'm fine with it. I don't find myself seeking it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I think it's a pretty terrific LP. I've asked for it for Christmas on vinyl.
I think it's deserving of it being regarded as
Yeah.
one of the best of this genre. I just personally don't care for those last 3 tracks.
It all makes sense when you think about the ingredients and you think about students of avant-garde composers,
Yeah.
jazz drummer,
Yep.
right? Stoned out guy found in the street.
Yep.
It's logical that we would get here. And the high points are extraordinary.
They really are.
I have not played much more of Can. I've
I haven't either.
Vitamin C, obviously. A couple tracks on Ege Bamiese I liked a lot. I felt like Future Days was kind of noodly, at least what I heard of it.
It treads into the jam band waters a little bit for
Yeah.
me, so
Feeding my thesis of let's just ignore the late 70s output of these bands.
yeah, agreed.
I say that, I've got Viva by La Dusseldorf on my desk behind the computer, and I love it so much.
Yeah.
But the exception that proves the rule.
So there is let me see if I can find it here quickly. There was an album called Sacrilege, which is a Can record, but these are their songs remixed by either them or one is a Sonic Youth remix. Uncle did a remix of Vitamin C. The Sonic Youth remix is of Spoon.
Nice.
Which is where Spoon got their name from. I started to listen to it earlier today, and it was interesting. Yeah. So I want to give that a little more of a listen. I was kind of more focusing on this one, but I listened to the first 2 tracks, and they were interesting.
There was also an album with Jaw Wobble, Jaki Liebezeit, and Holger Suke that I probably shouldn't have brought up because I have nothing to say about it because I haven't listened to it. It's on the to-do list, right? This would have been like I think post Public Image Limited. Well, not post Public Image Limited, but after at least the first album came out. So
I love how much John Lydon has been influenced by Krautrock, because literally he comes up in every, like the past 3 bands we've discussed, John Lydon,
right.
There's like some quote from him like raving about them.
Yeah, the fact there was some, like while he was in the Pistols, somebody took the risk of bringing him into, I think, Radio 1 and letting him DJ a set, and he was playing Can.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how important Can was. And I hear a lot of this, and I don't think Sex Pistols.
No, not at all.
At all.
That's a whole nother conversation, though, about what was happening with that band. So.
Right. I mean, for a guy who wore the T-shirt, I hate Pink Floyd, to say, but I love Can.
Right.
Interesting. Oh, I should give Pink Floyd Glenn's comment.
Oh, yeah.
On Can, which is of a piece with, I think, what he said about Amandul. Where is it here? Okay, I'm guessing at some point their producer said, no one wants to hear you sing, just jam.
Valid.
Yeah.
It's a valid comment.
And I guess maybe that's what the vocals are, right? Like, it's just Damo jamming.
Mm-hmm.
But
with his voice.
Right. You're about to say with words, but then you stopped yourself because it's not always with words.
Correct.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know if you noticed on Spotify, they have the 40th anniversary edition of Tago Mago, and there's 3 live tracks at the end from a show they did in 72. Mushroom sounds almost nothing like Mushroom on the record.
Right.
There's a 30-minute version of Spoon.
That's crazy.
And then a 9-minute version of Hallelujah. So it's kind of an interesting listen. It's really weird. You're like, what is going on? These don't even sound like what was recorded.
Right. So Glenn was listening to the Live in Dusseldorf, or sorry, it was Live in Stuttgart album, Live in Stuttgart. And the songs are just 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's what they're called. Or Ein, zwei, drei. Because, right, it might turn into something that sounds like those songs.
It's interesting because it almost makes you think how improvised was everything that they were doing. And then when they went to go play it live, they were like, well, let's just do this.
Right.
We're just going to keep jamming.
Right. The studio recording is just one. It's like one of a million possibilities.
Yeah.
It's just the one they stitched together on that particular day.
It's right. It's whatever Zuke stitched together.
Talk about a man in charge.
I dig it overall, though. It's
cool. Yeah, me too. Me too. Give me Hallelujah all night long.
God. I just love it. I played a lot of disco on that DJ set we had a couple weeks ago, and I came straight home and poured myself a whiskey and put that song on. And that's when I started texting all of you.
That palate cleansing again, yeah.
Whew, I was like, oh, I need this.
Awesome. So I think we spent a ton of time on this. It was a double album.
Yeah.
I guess it deserves it. It is in the canon. It is most assuredly a top 1,001 albums.
Yeah.
And on my list, definitely
it definitely deserves to be on that list.
20. Yeah. Terrific stuff. Whatever you think about that second album. If you like it, great. It's bonus. Yeah. That's what we'll say.
Exactly.
And we'll take on all the haters who think that we're not advanced enough.
Exactly. It's fine. Again, I'm fine with that.
Right. Maybe that makes us actually worth listening to. Wow. Who knows?
I don't know.
What makes us worth listening to. But the fact that we have limits, right? That we're not just going to love everything that we see here.
Also, we really gushed over Amandul and Noi because we really like those bands and those records. So this was a good third choice. 'Cause
Right.
while we love it, there's also some pieces of it that just don't really work for us.
It's not just all happy head,
No, it's not.
lovey-dovey stuff that you're going to get here from Carl and Brad.
It's like real
You're gonna
life.
get this right.
It's not an Instagram feed.
Right. It's not curated and perfect.
Curated. Oh gosh.
All right.
All right.
Let's wrap this up. We'll get cracking on thinking about what our next LP is. But we were glad to spend this evening with you listening to Tago Mago. Lead us into the good night, Carla.
Auf Wiedersehen. Did I say that right?
Yeah? Nailed it.
All right.